this has been a fringe topic for a long time.
Mhm.
And, you know, conspiracy theorists, wackos, whatever, blah, 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 you know, a very, again, small element, and even in the secular world. But there's several things that I've seen over the past really 10, 15 years. And one of them is, again, in my just following of the astronomical community, in the sense of, you know, being a subscriber to Astronomy Magazine and other things, that I was shocked going back probably 20 years how so much of the focus of astronomy now and research by NASA and other groups, even the European groups, that the idea of exoplanets, the idea of, even again now, we were talking in another context, people can get a PhD in astrobiology because they're looking for evidence of life on Mars, biology on Mars. They're looking for biology or microbes in the oceans of Europa, you know, a moon of Jupiter in this regard, where there's heat there. They're so desperate to find any sort of life anywhere in maybe vents, in the ocean vents, you know, deep in the ocean. So that's one aspect of this whole astrobiology effort to find life. And I want to talk about that. Well, maybe let's talk about that now, in the sense of what's the premise here as it relates to evolutionary mindset and the other things that you've seen.
But it's based on the live evolution. These guys, it's not that there's a lack of evidence for the existence of God. They don't want there to be a God. They want to follow their ungodly desires. They're willingly ignorant. They're going to believe something dumb on purpose. And again, dumb on purpose, what's that? Well, with all due respect, how much dumber can you get that we came from the goo to the zoo to me and you? And because you got to go back, it's the issue of origins, all right? Well, who made that goo? Well, it rained on the rocks for millions of years. Okay, well,
Right.
Where'd the rock come from? Well, all, you know, and so really a lot of reasons why they are gravitating more towards it, because it's a replacement religion. UFOs and aliens, the whole premise of them is a replacement religion based on the live evolution to try to explain away God, the God of the Bible, things of that nature, that we came from him. But basically, part of that is because, again, they want to follow their ungodly desires. So that's why they don't want there to be a God. The other aspect too is the last many years, because of the efforts of Christian scientists in the Christian creation movement, has been doing a very good job of bringing out the evidence for intelligent design.
Exactly.
That there's no way that any of this came from the goo to the zoo to me and you, that this is all design. Well, in the rebellion, they still don't want there to be a God, so aliens become that convenient excuse. Well, we didn't come from God, because we all know that can't be true. So if it wasn't from the goo to the zoo and me and you, and from some random chaotic event, then it was the aliens.
Panspermia.
Panspermia. And so we actually have a section in there dealing with that lie, panspermia, and how ridiculous that is. Because
so those might not know. Panspermia. Pan is the Greek word for all.
Yeah.
Sperm is the idea of seed.
Right.
So we were seeded, like, you know, SEEDED, from these other beings. They're the advanced ones. They came here however many millions of years ago, seeded us, started evolution, kickstarted it, managed it, watched it, blah, blah, blah. So go on.
And now they're back to help us in our time
Aren't
of
they
need,
wonderful?
because we've gotten a little astray.
Yep.
And as our, original creators, they're here to help. Yeah, what a bunch of baloney. But again, it's just made up baloney, just like evolution. There's no evidence for this, whatever. Plus, it doesn't solve the origin problem. Because, so we came from the aliens. And some people say that they deliberately did it. Some say that they dumped their trash. There's different theories. I don't know if you come across
Right.
them for Panspermia. They were flying across our atmosphere and they dumped their trash. Now that trash became the goo to the zoo to me and you, and they kickstarted evolution, all that baloney. Or it was a deliberate thing that they did. Or I even heard some encounters that they had the apes on the planet, and then they sped up the process with the apes to create human. All that baloney. There's no evidence for it. But anyway, the point is, okay, so bare bones. Let's go back to the issue. If you say it's a straight up evolution, we came from the goo to the zoo and me and you, who made the goo? Well, it rained on the rocks for millions of years. Okay, so we came from the rocks. Okay, well, where'd the rock come from? They call that the X factor.
Yeah.
Which is a fancy smancy way of saying we have no stinking idea.
Well, we're going to fill in the gaps with
exactly.
our own theory.
Yeah, and we'll just make it up. So panspermia, so they get around the intelligent design, so they think it's dumb on purpose, willingly ignorant of the evidence that when you see design as something, it implies the designer, i.e. God, not aliens. But anyway, the aliens don't solve the problem. All they do is shove it further down the line.
Kick the can down,
because again, all you got to do is logically use the brain that God gave you and say, well, wait a second. So you say we came from the aliens. All right. Who made those aliens? Well, that was another race of advanced aliens. All right. Well, who made those aliens? Well, that was another event. And all you do is just keep going back. But at some point, Who's the original alien? Where'd they come from? You don't escape the ultimate issue, right? Something cannot come from nothing. If there ever was a time when we had nothing, then we would have nothing. But we have something, so logically it tells you we came from somewhere, i.e. someone.
And I will say this, because this is where logic, people don't think anymore, is if you go back to the Middle Ages or even earlier, it goes back to the unmoved mover.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the original, this goes, again, just Middle Ages, people are recognizing to think through this, we had to come from a being who is self-existent.
Right.
It just has to be that way. Otherwise, again, we're nowhere.
Right. Well, and again, that's the bare bones definitions of a supreme being. Even the secularists would have to admit, if there is, in fact, a quote, supreme being, what makes them supreme above all? Well, they're everywhere present, right? They're all knowing, they're all powerful, and they're self-existent. And you say, well, why is that so important? Well, because if they were existent upon somebody else for the existence, then they're not supreme. Then, right? So it's just pure logic, right?
Pure logic.
Yeah, exactly. And dare I say, common sense.
Common sense.
Right?
Which hopefully is pure logic,
Right.
not anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But guess what? The Bible tells us where there was a time when there was nothing, ex nihilo,
Mm-hmm.
and out of that nothingness, because you can't have something out of nothing, there was someone, God, who is self-existent above the time and space, and there was no time. It's because in the beginning, God, in the beginning, time's a created thing. We know that scientifically. You can slow down time, you could warp time and do things of that nature. Time's a created thing. Most people don't think of it that way, but it is. In the beginning, time, God created time, and the heavens, space, and the earth, matter. Time, space, matter. And that's the very first verse in the very first page of the Bible. Good science.
Yeah, good science.
Right? Good logic, right? So again, God is the one that is where we came from. But this all is a sidetrack issue to get people to disbelieve in God, even though the evidence is overwhelming that from, I don't care, take a tree to a flea to a bee to you and me, we were intelligently designed. If I were to tell you that I found my watch, Mondo, I was driving into the office and I saw in the ditch on the side of the road, there's something caught there, a gleam in my eye, and I caught it, and I stopped. And you know what? It was a watch. And I still wear it to this day. You know, maybe about 12 moving parts. But you know where it came from? It came from over millions of years of exfoliation and wind and erosion. A lightning bolt struck it and out spontaneous combustion when it came this watch. If I were to actually say that, what would you say? That's ridiculous, right? I'm never going to listen to you again. You're a wacko, right? Well, that's a watch with 12 moving parts. You mean our bodies with 50 trillion cells with all of our organs, which all had to be there working all at the same time in order to fully function, did? And that ultimately, when we listen to your version story, you trace it down to not just the goo, but the goo came from where? It rained on we all came from rocks? Come on. Right? To what basically you said, don't be a rockhead.
Your
right?
chapter in there was excellent and just talking, helping people to see, again, these weren't even your words. You were just showing the conversation by others necessarily, and the weight of it for those that are willing. That's the willing to consider the obvious facts and common sense. They're like, yeah, okay.
Well, and again, that explains our society, because when you look at the evidence, and I tell people, listen, I'm just saying, are you really what I call intellectually honest? If you're intellectually honest, if you really want to know the truth about anything, then you got to let the facts speak for themselves, right? And so I tell people all the time, if you're intellectually honest, then you got to let the Bible speak for itself, right? And then when you let the Bible speak for itself, and then you compare it to genuine science, not made up science, you see that they work together, because God doesn't tell a lie, right? And so then when you take a look at the evidence in science that agrees with the biblical account, logic that agrees with the biblical account, philosophy that agrees with the biblical account, then you can't just downplay that. You can't ignore it. You're not being intellectually honest. You're being dishonest. But the Bible says, you know what you call that? You're willingly ignorant. You have chosen to believe something dumb on purpose, that we came from an ape when there's no evidence of that we came from the goo that ultimately came from the rock. You want to believe, listen, who's got more faith here? I'll believe in the evidence of intelligent design that God created us, just like the Bible said.
It's what we experience in real life all the time.
Exactly. Rather than that we all came from a rock. And where'd the rock
by
come
random
from?
processes.
I don't know. X factor.
Yep. Yeah. And you know, it's not a cliche that's a wrong, is that it takes more faith to believe in, which again, faith is evidence of things unseen, right? It takes more faith to believe in a system that has been postulated that is unseen in anything that we experience, that order comes from chaos, whether
Right.
that's a soup, a primordial soup, which again, there's no evidence for where, again, no answers for where that came from.
Yeah. But let me add this one little thing. And the reason why I think it's important to deal with this, and we deal with this pretty much towards the beginning in exposing the lie of evolution, because again, that's their premise. They're
That's the
higher
premise,
evolved.
yeah.
But stop and think about that, Mondo. When did the lie of evolution begin to permeate the planet until now it's become the only basic view that's allowed, dare I say, in spite of the evidence to the contrary, to other sciences, including geology and, like you said, in astronomy, and it's like, and even in the biology, the medicine world, it's like, how can you maintain atheism when you take a look at the complexity of the bodies? But whatever. But this has been going on for about 150 years, since the time of Charles Darwin, right? So think about this, and this is why it's important. It not only builds the premise for the lie of aliens, that they're higher evolved beings from outer space, but that was really only the first step. So the next step, the bigger step, is then they become, once they get accepted that this is even a possibility, and you can't do that until you lay the planet with this lie of
evolutionary
evolution.
foundation, yeah.
Then you set them up for the next lie, and that is, well, everybody knows they're real, and that's what happened to those people who disappeared, right? So think about how slowly, methodically Satan is. He started with the lie to explain away the rapture of the church 150 years ago. But that's whom we have to deal with. That's who he is.
See, as you were talking, the whole idea of the alien, the Panspermia, these other beings that are saviors, it's all been built to explain the rapture, which was to explain origins, also to explain a beast system, and to give credence for them to be the ones to bring order out of the chaos of this mass abduction or disappearance, which we know as the rapture.
Right. Yeah, and again, you look back, what is that? That's deceit, that's lies, deception. Where does that come from? John chapter 8. That's from Satan. Satan's a liar. He's the father of all lies. I may not have been there. Obviously, you weren't there. None of us were there when Charles Darwin comes up with this lie, and he's going around in his HMS Beagle boat there, and
looking at beaks of
different birds, right? And it's because but that thought came from somewhere, and it wasn't the Spirit of God, because that's a lie.
Well, and even prior to him, you have, which I think again goes back to Charles Lyell,
the long ages.
Yeah, the long ages, the uniformitarian idea that we see Peter amazingly in 2 Peter 3. So the Bible, it's amazing how it warns us of these. But you need the long ages for evolution to work, and then so you have two Charles, Lyell and Darwin, coming along to do this and setting the stage. What do you think now? I mean, we're watching, again, going back to 1850, even before, watching this, and now over the last, let's say from 2017, again, this has been fringe. The aliens fringe. People could ignore it, whatever. But now there's been this soft disclosure. Now we're having meetings in the government, in our very own Congress. So if you're listening to this, your Congress now is having these meetings over and over and over. Tim Burchett's been talking and wanting transparency about all these things. But now it's becoming governmentally accepted or endorsed of something out there. But it brings the attention now. It's in the mainstream, I guess is what I'm saying, versus the fringe. Now it's in the mainstream. That contributes as well to the preparatory nature of people believing this when it does come.
Well, including a third Charles, or dare I say Chuck Schumer. He's there to help us out, the wonderful Democrat guy, and he's going to help bring out the disclosure. But no, in all seriousness, that's another reason why we wanted to hurry up and get this out, because, and this was my feeling, if in fact UFOs and aliens are going to become the excuse to explain away the rapture of the church, which I'm convinced, then what would you expect to happen on the world scene if we're getting close to that event, right? Then I would expect at some point we're going to have to see a flip of the switch from what we've seen for the last many decades. You talk about, like I said, this is something different's going on. Well, I don't think it's by chance. And for decades, it's been absolute denial, complete denial, not just of UFOs, but aliens. Oh no, that's just crazy. That's whatever, right? Even though Hollywood and the secular education is building that mindset in your head. But the governments, is where I'm going with this. The governments, oh, no way, never, never, never. But like you said, all of a sudden something flipped. And all of a sudden, we're seeing right now governments around the world, including our own. First, it was just UFO aircraft. They're UFOs to UAPs, and what they're trying to change. Okay, yeah, we're out there. Then what's happening even more recently? They're going to the next step. And the next step is, it ain't just UFOs. It's aliens, these creatures we've been working with. We've been interrogating them, right, behind the scenes. And they're
agreements have been struck.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But this isn't like joeschmo.com, wackyufoguy.org. This is from our own government. But should it surprise you if you understand the end game? And the end game is you better come up with some excuse for the rapture. And you've been denying this whole time while at the same time building the mindset in people's minds with the live evolution. But that was just step one. The ultimate step is this is the excuse to explain away the rapture. So what should you expect? We, at some point, if we're getting close to the rapture, you should see the government going from denial to admittance, including the admittance of aliens. And that's why we want to get this out quick, because that's happening right now.